All right. Welcome, everyone. Glad to see everybody's jumping in and getting set. Looking forward to having you all here. And as you can see, we're going to be going through some sculpture tools and essentials today, which I'm quite excited to share with each and every one of you. Again, we're going to go ahead and give a few moments to allow all the participants time to get logged in and switch over to our class. So as we get things set, go ahead and feel at home. Get yourself comfortable because you most likely are at home. Just as a reminder for those of you that are attending and joining this session, we will be using Socrative today. So if you have not already downloaded the Socrative student app, please feel free to do so. You can also go to Socrative.com in order to participate. Our room name today will also be Pivot Point. I will list all of this in the chat. And again, we've got about 3 minutes past the hour, so we'll get started shortly. Socrative student app. I'm listing this in the instructions. So the room name is Pivot Point. And again, we'll be using that towards the end of the session for a bit of review. So you've got some time to download it or get logged in if you are just getting set up. I see many familiar faces and names here on the call. So hello, everyone. Welcome back. I am looking forward to this session. I've got a number of resources I'm excited to share with you and information. Looking forward to bringing along. And for those of you that are joining this one, hopefully you'll also be looking at attending our 7 sculpting procedures information later on this afternoon, along with another seminar we have on tapers and fades that's going to be hosted by other amazing team members, both of which are also on this Zoom. So hello, Jason, and hello, Corey. If you'd like to say hey, you're welcome to.
Hey, everybody.
Hello. Good to see you all.
Sounded like that was in your singing voice there, Jason.
It was. I will sing for you.
Depending on how much you can see, I have a very antsy guest that's here with me. All right, we have about 5 minutes past the hour, so we're going to go ahead and get started talking about some information on the sculpture tools and essentials. And just to let you know, as we kind of go through this session, we'll be doing a little bit of back and forth. I'm going to share some information and also bring some tools out to actually discuss them right with you guys, demonstrate a few of the tools that I use, and just hopefully kind of bring this to life even a bit more. So with this, as you can see, as we go through sculpture tools and essentials, my goal is to really help you get a good understanding on the variety of different tools that we utilize in sculpture or haircutting. We're going to be talking about shears. We're also going to discuss taper shears and the relationships and differences that those have. We're going to look at razors as well as clippers, including even the discussion of trimmers. We'll also discuss some of the different types of combs that you can use and really break down a good understanding of the variety of essentials of information that kind of go across all of these in factors that we'll discuss. Again, one more time, I just want to welcome everybody that's joining. I really enjoy you guys taking time out of your day to cover this information. One more time, for those of you that haven't attended a previous session, my name is Daniel Dunworth. I'm a Learning Engagement and Development Manager for Pivot Point. And I will say haircutting is one of my absolute loves. So I'm really looking forward to sharing this information with you all. As we go through this, one thing I want you guys to really think about is the tool choices that you make. And really right off the get-go here, what I'd like to ask each of you to even share with me is you can use the chat feature. Hopefully you guys have already identified the chat on here. Again, I'm going to go ahead and just type a quick Q&A in the chat so you guys will be able to find that. Do you really think that the quality of tool impacts the price that maybe you charge for it? And to that, how many of you really believe it will be important to invest in your tools in your future? Okay. So I want to know, what are your thoughts? What are your thoughts on tools? And I'm going to post this right in the chat here. And I'd love for you to just share your thoughts with me as we get started. And I'll be reading through those as we get started. But I really want to know what your thoughts are. Like, why, if you believe in investing in your tools, why? And especially as we talk about some of our cutting tools specifically, I'd even love to know from you all, what are some of the things, if you've purchased a tool already, if you've gone out and made that initial investment in yourself, what were some of those deciding factors to you? If you've bought a pair of shears already yourself, what made you purchase them? What made you say, yes, I want to spend my money on these versus maybe another one that you've seen? So let me know your thoughts on that. And I'm going to build off of that as we progress through this seminar and get talking about it. But, really for us, not only is there the price side of it, but there's also the quality side to it. Making sure that you get the right quality of haircut that you're looking for and selecting the right tool. So this is another piece I want to look at, is what effect does each tool provide? What is the real benefit to using it? I speak to many hairdressers all across the world, and some of them absolutely love choosing a certain tool. While there's some hairdressers that even look at it and say, I don't know, I never used this tool. I'm intimidated by a thinning shear. I'm intimidated by a razor because I've never used it before. I don't know how to use it. So of course, understanding your tools will really help you know how to get the most even bang for your buck. Is there a tool that can help you work smarter and not harder? So looking at these, I see a few comments coming through, talking about the steel right away, and we can discuss this. The quality definitely makes a difference, right? When giving an awesome haircut, not just any haircut, but an awesome haircut. That's what I love to see there. Of course, investing money in good tools is worth it to make sure they're both durable and the best quality performance. I agree with that. Another one from Allison, tools are very important. Make my job easier. Great, great, great. I only purchase T-edgers, so very specific type of blade you're looking for there. Another one, looking at blow dryers, how fast the blow dryer will dry, how hot it will get, how long it will last, what it looks like. So those are some decisions in a recent tool purchase that you've made. Some even saying, let's look at the reviews and find out, making your choices by, a popular opinion. And I think many of us are even accustomed to that from things like Amazon, Google reviews. If something has 2 stars, you almost automatically look away from it. But you may come across scenarios where those even public opinions may not be available. So how do you know that you're getting the tool that you want? So let's start talking about a few of these things. And what we're going to cover is, we're going to break down these tools. So when you go to do your shopping, you're like, here's a little bit of education for you. You can start asking, informative questions. You can start digging deeper to get an understanding of what you're looking for. And I'm even going to share a few extra nuggets that won't be included right here by even demonstrating a few of the tools I use and demonstrating the choices and why I make them. And so we'll go through that. Again, we're going to break this down in a few of these different categories. We're going to talk about shears specifically, clippers, taper shears, AKA thinning shears, AKA texturizing. There's, a lot of these have different words. It depends on kind of what goes along with it. We'll also talk about what's known as a channeling shear. We will discuss combs because you could have the right cutting tool, but your comb is just as much of a factor in that as anything. And then, of course, we're also going to look at some razors, not necessarily in this specific order, but we'll really go through all of these. The important thing to remember is each tool is unique. So remember, even in things, of course, like today's day and age, it's really important to understand your safety and infection control practices. Not everything can be disinfected the same way. Now, I'm going to share a story with you right off the get-go. I remember in a class, working with learners that, we talked about how metal can be disinfected a certain way. A lot of times, you can immerse it or use an alcohol to clean metal instruments. Well, I kid you not, one day I was walking around a salon environment and I saw somebody with their clippers completely dunked inside of a barbicide container, the big blue jars, if you're familiar with that. The whole clipper, all the way up to the cord. They had this sucker. Let's see, let's just grab one of them out of my case. They took it and they had that thing entirely dumped in there down to the cord. And I asked them, what exactly are you up to? And they said, well, it's metal, so I'm disinfecting it. I'm immersing it in a cleaning solution. And I said, right, that doesn't quite work because, yes, part of it might be metal, but you also have to remember it's an electrical tool. It doesn't work like that. There's different ways we have to manage it, and cleaning a trimmer, a clipper versus one of your shears are also going to be quite a bit different. So we're going to be mindful of those factors as we go along. So let's jump into it and let's talk about some information on shears, right? And again, I'll be sharing even some of my own tool choices and things we go into here. Now, a shear, of course, can cover a number of different things, but you may also hear this known as a straight shear, and that's for the fact that, of course, both blades are smooth edges. I typically have these two straight blades. Now, I will say that there are a number of shears out there, many of which are sometimes considered like a dry cutting shear or a slicing shear, things like that. That those blades are not necessarily always straight. Sometimes they can actually be a little convex or maybe even a little concave, but the point and difference is that they all have that smooth edge to them. There's no teeth or notches within it. This, of course, is a tool that you'll primarily find yourself turning to when doing a majority of your hair sculpting. It's going to give you the clean edge, as you can kind of see here. There's that nice clean edge to those hair strands. It creates that blunt cut to it. Shears themselves are available in a number of different ways and a number of different costs. And while this can be a general expectation, I'm not going to say it's a rule, but generally you get what you pay for when it comes to shears. You can spend sometimes as little as 40 or 50 bucks on a shear, and they may sound great, right? But they may not really do the job you need them to do, and they may not be, perform the way that you expect them to. And there are some shears that you may go into that you will at some point in time in your career invest $1,000 or more in, right? Shears can be an expensive tool. But this also goes back to the question we thought about earlier is, if I'm investing $1,000 into my tools, hopefully I'm also asking my guests to invest in me. But if there is one kind of expectation I'd also set for you is, just because you buy a more expensive tool doesn't necessarily mean you're performing more expensive haircutting, right? So make sure that your skill, you're also investing in much in training yourself as you are in providing yourself a great tool. And thinking about, a flat iron. Just because you buy the most expensive flat iron doesn't mean you actually know how to perform the most highest quality flat iron. So always remember there's a relationship with these when you think about that investment. As you invest more in your skill, invest in the tools that can support you there. As we also look at shears, they can come in a variety of different lengths. And I've brought a few of my tools here with me to just kind of demonstrate some of these options as well. Let's see, and I've got a few of my different shears here to discuss and talk about with you. Let's see, that's one of them. And I'm going to grab one more here. And actually, I'm going to grab one final one. Try to get a few of my options I have here. But shears can come in a variety of length. And for this, I'm going to go ahead and just pause my sharing for a moment and just bring out my camera with you. That here, hopefully I can demonstrate these to you in a nice, easy way. These are all 3 different shears, but as you can see, they come in 3 different length options. That you can work everything from down to even about a 4-inch shear. The shortest one that I have is about a 5 1/4, up to a 6-inch shear, which for me personally, I really consider this a workhorse. A 6-inch shear really allows me a lot of flexibility in the different looks that I do. And you can even go into a 7-inch blade or longer. So these are a few different examples. Now, when selecting the length, really it's a matter of more what type of work are you going to do with these. The shorter the shear, usually the more precision and detailed work you're doing. Maybe cleaning up around an ear or performing little detailed perimeter cuts or working in tight spaces. Again, like I said, a 6-inch shear I really consider to be a pretty nice workhorse. This allows me to do quite a bit, that in between, probably the length that I myself turn to most often. And then when you've got something, again, like a 7-inch or longer shear, this one here, this is your knuckle eater, right? And I'm just kidding with that. But this is really great when you're doing things like an overcomb technique, right? If I'm working any type of maybe tapering or refinement like that. Also really great for doing solid one-length haircuts because it allows me to have the smoothest flow of that line possible. So a lot of different options when you're working with a variety of different shear lengths. Of course, don't let just the length impress you, but also think about your comfort when working with that length. You know, if you've got shorter fingers, you may feel more comfortable working with a shorter blade out of control. If you've got longer fingers and larger hands, you may feel a little more comfortable with a larger blade. So also factor in those types of considerations to it. What are you comfortable working with? As we kind of continue with some of this shear information, let's talk about the different aspects to it. I'm going to go ahead and just use my my 6-inch, my workhorse for it. That there's many different pieces to this. That a few of them we'll talk about, of course, of the different finger holes or finger grips that are on here. You've got one that's traditionally for your ring finger, which allows you to control that nice still or stationary blade. You also then have a thumb grip, a lower finger grip here that helps you control the movable or mobile blade to this. You'll also have a brace or what's also commonly known as a tang when looking at that. So all of this, those key features here, if we isolate just that stationary blade here, would allow me to help really keep that balance. All right, so that's kind of the benefit, especially to working with one of those braces or tangs, is that helps you create that appropriate balance to it. When you're also looking at the additional pieces that help you out with that mobile blade, again, as we talk about that thumb grip, but then you have the variety, the kind of pieces in between that are important to understand and know, and that includes your tension control for your shears, right? And that shank or that handle. This is an area that many people sometimes neglect. You know, they'll come in and they'll want to clean their blades quite often, but they really don't help monitor what that tension control could be, or even clean the hair out from areas around there. When working with your shears, and we'll even do a little test here, and mine, just from being in my case, need a little bit of adjustment. I want to talk about some control here. So again, let me go ahead and just switch back over to my camera for a moment. That when working with this, we have our tension control. I'm going to go right in on the camera here. But this specific shear has a tension control screw, one that I can easily dial with my fingers and click. Some of your shears, which I happen to have another one here that I'll pull out. This shear here that I have, also another 6-inch, it does not have a tension screw that I can control with my fingers. Instead, I actually need to use a special tool to adjust that tension. There's really no difference in what those offer. It's really a matter of convenience. Do I want to go for a tool to actually have to tighten this? Or can I quickly adjust it just with a few clicks of this tension control? And I want to give you a little suggestion for monitoring tension. Many users that as they work with their blades sometimes find that their shears may not actually cut the hair the way that they want it to. They may find that it pushes the hair out, or the hair actually folds inside of your shears. I'd like to ask a quick question, even just using the chat. Has anybody here ever had their shears fold their hair before? You know, just bends over, it doesn't actually cut it. Let me know if you've ever had that happen in the chat, and I'm going to share a few tips of what you can do to monitor that. So here's this tension screw can typically be what you need to focus on. I know many hairdressers that have their shears fold the hair and they're like, oh, my blades are dull. I need to send these out to sharpening. and they send them out to get sharpened. They send the check with it. And what happens is all they do is go straight to the tension screw and they send your shears right back to you because they're not dull. Many times shears can bend hair if your tension is too loose. Again, thinking about the science of shears, the way that they cut is if you have two blades, it's the pressure between them that as they cut hair, there's the right amount of space that let them open and close, but they'll also slice the hair in between there. If that tension is too loose, if there's too much of a gap between those blades, even if they're as sharp can be, when they close like this with a gap between them, well, the hair will just bend over because it has the flexibility. The same point in time, if your shears are too tight and they're squeezing together and you try to cut them, it'll actually feel like your shears are dull because they will push the hair out of the blades rather than actually cut it just from being too tight. So I'm going to give you my own little best practice here of working with a tension screw. I'm going to take this tension screw, I'm going to turn it a bunch of dials to the left, right? Lefty loosey, righty tighty. So now that these are super loose, I'm going to take these shears, and if I drop them, I can see that the thumb grip just smashes into the finger grip, okay? I don't want that. That's too loose. What that will cause is definitely cause bending in my hair. If I take that screw and I tighten it a bunch to the right-hand side, and now I open it, I can see that thumb grip stays spread, right? And I don't want that. That's too tight. What I'm really looking for, and I've got to force that, and I don't want to do it because that could actually nick my blades. I'm going to loosen this up. Go back to super loose here. And now that it's loose, I'm going to click it. 1 or 2 clicks at a time. And what I'm going to look for is that as I bring up that thumb grip, I'm going to keep going 1 or 2 clicks at a time until that thumb grip stops just shy of that finger grip. And that's almost just a little too tight. I'm going to come back 1, lift this up, and here, if I zoom in, you can see that my shear, it's stopping before it slams in. For me, that is a good exercise that I do to ensure my shears are at that right tension, not too tight, not too loose. And that tension screw can save you a lot of money when you think your shears are dull. So check that out. Get familiar with how you adjust the tension on your shears. But let's go ahead and come back to a bit more information on these tools. Hopefully that helps you out. Looking at this and also offering some discussions on working with shears, of course, how you hold it, right? Ring finger is what's recommended in that finger grip. Your thumb goes into the stationary blade. And then there's a few options for how you can do what's called palming with shears. If you take your thumb out, you can simply close your palm around. But some people like to do this activity, just a different style of palming, where you can actually turn the shears in your hand. So that way they face away from your palm. The one thing I want to let you know, again, I'm going to go ahead and pause this and just call this out big screen, is especially as a learner, if you're ever approaching state board or any of those types of assessments, typically a standard palming, which is just gripping it into your hand like so, is what's recommended. Sometimes you, again, may see a hairdresser that takes their thumb out and actually turns it around to palm it like so, kind of this little gunslinger move. Sometimes your boards may not allow you to actually palm your shears like that. So make sure that you do your local kind of board and regulation research to know whether or not you're limited to a standard palming or a twist palming like this, okay? So that alternative method is not permitted in every region. So make sure, of course, you know your laws and regulations. What that allows you to do, let me bring this back, no matter which way I go, that allows me that once these shears are palmed to actually use 2 or 3 fingers here to control my comb, right? So that allows me to set up no matter which way I go. I now have that index, middle, and thumb to give me good, strong comb control when working with those shears. So let's carry on with a few more discussions here. When working with your shears, there's a few different positions you also want to be mindful of, and that's how you actually hold your shears. One, for a bit of stability, two, for control, three, for ergonomics as well. The last thing you want to do is really burn out your wrist, your palm, your arm sooner than you need to, sooner than you probably ever want to. No one ever needs to or wants to. But when working, there's a few different ways in which you can position your shears to help you work most ergonomically, depending on where you're at on the head. And again, turning to this, one of the standard ways that we cut most of our lower lengths, especially our kind of perimeter or our lines, especially a solid form like a 1 length or 0 degree haircut, is palm down. And that's when both of your hands are facing down to the ground. And I'll demonstrate each of these in a moment. In palm up, you typically have your cutting hand positioned with the palm towards the sky. The one thing you really want to be mindful of this is the bend on the wrist, is that if you're not in the right body position, working in a palm up, if you don't really position the arm, the shoulder, the rest of your body, you can really put a bit of strain onto your wrist with this. So really be careful with that. And again, I'll close this out and we'll go full screen and I'll demonstrate each of these in a minute. The other one that you have is a considered palm to palm. And this almost looks like you're going to shake your own hand. We typically find a lot of this palm to palm to be used in more of our gradation or graduation techniques, or also in very tight to reach spaces, because it allows you to get both your kind of controlling hand and your cutting hand in the right area without being too far from the head or overextending anything. We also have the on top of the finger position, which is what we use most through any interior layering techniques and things like that. So working with those, again, being mindful of that body position is key. So one more time, let's go ahead and come back and focus on some big picture things. So with my shears in my hand, to demonstrate a bit of palm down, if I grab my comb again, is most times when I'm cutting, I'm going to be holding hair down, both palms to the ground. Right? And I'll be cutting below my fingers in a palm down position here. Now, the other option is a palm up, that if I was cutting low and maybe I needed to get in a tight to reach space, if I get low enough, raise my guest chair high enough, I can cut in a palm up position. But the one thing I want to note is I'm going to turn sideways for a moment, is notice that extra bend on the wrist from a palm down, which can keep me pretty straight, to a palm up. This extra strain right here, that bend of the wrist, really be mindful of it because it's not the most ergonomic position. So try not to overuse that. Sometimes, and I'll be honest, I see many hairdressers that when they're cutting and they bring hair down to them, they hold it in front of them and then they cut turning their wrist up immediately. And that really can, increase the rate of which things like carpal tunnel or arthritis develop down there in that wrist area. So really be mindful of it. I encourage you to try to gravitate more towards palm down, palm to palm, and on top of the fingers when appropriate. Working in graduated form, again, that's going to be typically you're working at more of an angle. So you're able to get in here and actually, it almost looks like you're going to shake your own hand, but you're actually just coming in and working inside your palm, right? So your shears are in your palm like so, okay? And then you got on top of the fingers, which is where you're typically holding the hair up high, and you're also cutting above your fingers this way, all right? So that gives you a little bit more tension, a little bit more control. Utilizing the right technique at the right time, again, gives you the best control, puts you in the best ergonomic position, and allows your tools to do the most appropriate work for you that they can, so you're not overstraining yourself. So again, if you're, most cutting positions, your wrists, especially your cutting wrists, should be able to stay mostly straight. The moment you begin going, to too severe of a bend, really think to yourself, am I using the right hand position for this? Right? Now, this is also true. Each of those apply to many of the tools that we use, but I'm going to go ahead and jump over and start talking about another one of the shears that we use, which is taper shears. Taper shears, again, sometimes also known as a thinning shear or a texturizing shear. These come in a variety of different styles. Most commonly, all right, you have a stationary blade that is used with the teeth side, and your mobile blade is actually the straight edge to these shears. Now, I will say that many times you could actually find a texturizing or thinning shear or taper shear that is actually dual-sided with the teeth, that there is no straight blade, right? Sometimes you can find a texturizing shear that does actually have the straight blade as the stationary. What you really have to know and understand that as shear, research and use develops is that they give you different effects or different opportunities to use them. So make sure you also do your research on, versus a pretty traditional taper shear, why does another thinning or texturizing shear have dual side teeth? What does that actually offer you? The major benefit behind working with a taper shear is that it creates that variety of length. You get some hair that remains long, some hair that's cut a bit shorter. When working with the names behind these, you'll also typically find that they're referenced in different ways. And this commonly is known as either a taper 8, taper 16, or taper 32. That's a common name that's been used for a long time. What that really means is what's the spacing between the teeth, or sometimes that teeth count, where, in a taper 8 typically has somewhere around about a 1/8 measurement, gives you somewhere maybe around 8 teeth. A taper 16 can have as small as a 16th measurement between teeth, and a taper 32 can have as small as a 32 measurement between the teeth, which again increases the number of teeth that you have. What does all that numbering mean? Again, it's the amount of hair that you're reducing. The less teeth that there are, the less hair that's being removed. The more teeth, right, the bigger that number, right, means the more hair you're removing. So you're going to thin it out or texturize it out more. It's really important to know the spacing of those teeth so that way you know how much hair you're reducing, right? When working with these, what happens, and I'm going to go ahead and just zoom in on my shears one more time to go ahead and call out a few extra details here. Let's zoom in on this. That when you're looking at the teeth of this shear, right, what catches it is right up on top, these teeth catch the hair. When it cuts that hair that's caught on the teeth. And if you notice when I close these all the way, notice how there's still space underneath that blade that you can see through, right? That see-through area, hair safely falls into that and doesn't get cut. So it stays long. That's the idea behind it. And again, working with those different sizes allows you to reduce the appropriate amount of hair that you need. So having a taper 8, taper 16, taper 32, all in your toolbox can be very beneficial because they don't do the same job, right? You really want to work with some of those different effects. And this may even include using something like a channeling shear. Now, a channeling shear has really large notches inside of that blade. It's the same, and many times it's very similar concept to a taper shear, that you have a smooth blade and then one notched blade. And these come in everything from concave to convex styles, big square notches that are in there. I've seen circles that are cut inside of it. Of course, what you really want to pay attention to is how much hair does it reduce, and what's that spacing? What's really going to help you create that dramatic effect that you're looking for? And that's typically what a channeling shear will do, is give you a more dramatic effect to that. So really, again, a channeling shear is not the same as a thinning or texturizing shear. While channeling shear does create texture, it's more dramatic. It's big disconnection. Texturizing shears, taper shears, thinning shears, each of those being basically synonymous with another, they're really about a softer, more blended look to it, okay? So working with that, I've brought a few of those out. Many times, I'll even just share one more time, many times that your texturizing shears can also come in a variety of lengths. And again, the longer the shear, the more territory it can cover, so the less cuts you may need to perform. Let's shift gears and talk about another tool here, a razor. I find that there's many artists out there that either love a razor or have no idea what to do with a razor. Maybe they never had to use it. They used it once and then just never went towards it again. The idea behind a razor is to create softer effects to the ends of the hair. You know, again, think that when you take a shear and I cut the hair, it creates a very blunt edge, right? Very clean, smooth edge. Where a razor, when I cut with a razor, it's actually going to help kind of soften that hair and wisp it out a bit more. Because what we typically do is a little bit of this kind of etch or slide motion with it that creates a really nice tapered effect. And razors come in a variety of different designs, a few of which, again, I'll even show you today. But when working with it, it's find one that's going to be comfortable for you. Some people do prefer working with a foldable blade, which many of you, especially as learners, will probably find yourself using, is that actual foldable blade. These foldable blades typically have a removable guard to them as well. And I'm just doing some search through here for a few of my tools. Although interesting, my other razor is not there. That's okay. There it is. So while you may be working with a foldable blade, you may find yourself working with a few other options. A very classic feather razor, right? Or you may get yourself some type of an alternative designer razor that may have a slightly larger handle or maybe a slightly different handle. This one that I have here is a metal handle, so the weight of it is a little bit heavier than some of your plastic ones. But what those three razors that I just showed you all have in common is that the edge of the blade also has a guard pretty much built right into it. It's a guard that overlaps it. So those are some of your big differences. When you look at these two on screen, there are razors that have these, again, blades with a guard edge, while there are some that have those removable or slidable blade guards with a straight edge blade inside of it. Of course, it's important to understand when working with those, when you go into those different blades, how do you sanitize? How do you also safely dispose of and remove those razors? Again, if I look at some of my razor examples here, and one more time, I'm going to go ahead and just come big screen. That to demonstrate this here is an example of one of the razors that has a guard built into it. So the razor, if I could really get this camera to focus, we'll see how it goes. But the razor's straight edge is surrounded by those little metal kind of teeth that you can see on it, giving me a little extra safety to it. That guard cannot be removed from this blade. And again, that's really beneficial when working with some of these these handles that have more of that, the razors that have more of a built-in handle. Now, again, many of them have the very similar tools or positions. Like this one here actually has a finger guard to it. It actually has a tang or a brace along with my full shoulder or shank to it, right? While a designer razor may not necessarily have, like this one here, may not necessarily have finger guards to it, but it still has the areas in which I can rest to create balance. And there's a variety of different ways in which you can hold the razors depending on the type of handle that you get. Again, just to reinforce, many of you may start out with one of these more foldable razors and choose to add an additional razor to your arsenal. But keep in mind, again, knowing that many of you may be learners, it's important to understand even what your state board or licensure requirements or your territories require you to use, that you don't want to go in with the wrong tool in the wrong scenario. So be mindful of that. And the other thing I would always encourage you to do is make sure that you are practicing your proper safety with these razors. Removing the blades, this is not something that you typically want to do right with you don't want to just grab a razor, whether it has a built-in guard or not. You don't just want to grab it and start sliding because both of them can cut you. So it's important to follow the appropriate manufacturer's directions of that razor. Use the appropriate disposal methods, all of which, of course, are things you want to understand in the tools that you invest in. So again, please always keep that in mind. Guard built in or not, you never want to bare hand a razor to try to swap a blade. Both are just as dangerous as another. So with that, hopefully that's helping you understand a little bit of, again, razor design, shear design. And another important tool that we also use is the clipper. Now, the clipper can be quite a really versatile tool. The idea behind a clipper is that it removes hair faster than your other tools. While a shear really is, of course, a close at a time, and a razor may be a stroke at a time, you know, clippers are designed to do things quickly. In fact, Ivan Zoot, known as the Clipper Guy, actually even set a world record doing 340 haircuts. I believe it was in less than, was it an hour or just a couple of hours? But he set a record, 340 haircuts, back-to-back consecutive with a clipper. And it's all because of the speed in which a clipper allows you to work. That going with this, clippers come again in a variety of different ways and fashions and can also utilize a number of different attachments that can go with it. There are also texturizing blades and a variety of different blades that can be used with a razor. So also spend your time doing some research to understand what clipper options there are. As someone mentioned earlier, well, it's really important for me to buy a T-blade. And a T-blade is just an example of this one here that I have, where the blade itself is set typically a little bit wider than the actual body of the blade or even the clipper handle in many cases. And that allows you to work in sometimes, you know, tight nooks and crannies, different areas, but also understanding, you know, there's definitely a difference between a clipper and a trimmer. Traditionally, it's identified by size, that a clipper is larger, while a trimmer is sometimes more, you know, smaller in size, narrow or sleek, to allow you to get into those tighter areas around the ear, the hairline, and things like that. But when working with clippers, it's just as important to understand their design as a shear. So let's talk a little bit about what we'll see on clippers. And again, I'll go into some demonstration with this. A clipper, most clippers, now this is again, is not every clipper, but most clippers, I'm going to start out near the very kind of tip near the blades, come with an adjustable blade. All right. Now what that lever does is it allows you to increase the length of what that kind of that guard or plate would offer you. Working with this, it extends the range between the edge of that guard or the heel of this clipper and the teeth of the cutting blade. Just like shears, clippers have a movable blade. Of course, it's the one that goes back and forth and actually cuts the hair. Now, working with your clipper, you have a few different things depending on how it's built. You can have an example like the one I'm holding in my hands, and I'll go full screen in a moment, of cordless. So you can have the ability to actually remove the cord or sometimes, many times, actually plug it in. But you also have a variety of different ways in which you can even work with like the on-off switch. Some have like a slider. Some may even have a button. In this case, and again, many clippers by design actually have like a bit of a toggle switch off to the side. So understanding these different parts really help you understand it, but it's also the motor. So I'm going to pause this screen share for a moment. I want to talk a little bit about clipper motors and what's offered there. One of the most common motors that you'll find in many clippers that you use is what's considered a magnetic motor. And this happens to be an example of it. I've got the the Magic Clip cordless clipper in my hand. That this you could typically hear, and let's see if we can get it right in the microphone. So you can kind of hear this initial kind of click on. And that click on is what really powers up that motor. And that initial click is that magnet really kicking into drive. Inside of this clipper is a large magnet that actually powers a metal arm to bounce back and forth. And working with that, one of the big, you know, kind of benefits to that is, you know, the battery life is a little bit longer just because it's not, you know, it's not too heavy of a load, but it also allows it to be a little bit more lightweight. The one limitation to a magnetic motor is it doesn't have as much power traditionally behind it because it's a magnet and it's just bouncing back and forth. If it faces too thick of hair or too dense of hair, that magnet may not have enough force to actually cut all the way through it. So you have to be really mindful with that. I'm even going to show you what this looks like, the inside of a magnetic motor, so you can quickly see and identify what that looks like. It's a very unique structure to it. Most magnetic clippers all work the same way, having this kind of core magnet power along with that arm that just kind of ricochets. While we do that, let's see, I think I've got that completely open and off. Right? I don't think I'm missing another one here at all. Oh, maybe not. That's okay. The other options you may have are something that's considered a rotary motor. Too much cord. Now, rotary motors, I'm going to go ahead and just highlight this feature. If I can get right in there, and hopefully it's not, I don't think it should be too dirty, but rotary motors, I've actually removed the blade so I can demonstrate this for you. But rotary motors, this has a little lever inside of here that the blade attaches to, and that actually spins a motor, like a semi-motor driven piece that actually moves the clipper around, right? And as that spins, the blade moves back and forth. Those types of motors are pretty good for your universal hair. It's good for your medium textured, medium density and below. The most powerful type of clipper is what is really known as a full-blown motor clipper. And a prime example of this would be the Oster, the classic 76s, or even the Titans. They have a very distinct sound and sometimes even a very distinct smell to them. And typically you can see them even coming with a variety of speeds. So if you ever have the ability to even control your speed, that could be a good indication that you're working with a motor-driven tool. Those motor-driven tools are really great for working with your extremely dense and extremely coarse hair. They've got the power to go back and forth, and again, really eat through coarse to very dense hair. So those three options, again, magnetic is going to be your, let's call it your featherweight, right? Your lighter weight tool. You also then have your rotary driven, which is a good workhorse, nice in between, good for medium texture, medium density. And then you also have your full motor driven ones, which can really eat through dense, coarse hair. All of which I would say can even be used on wet hair in most cases, but sometimes your motor-driven ones can have a harder time there. And again, as promised, I just want to demonstrate what the inside of a motor-driven tool looks like. So I'm going to go ahead and open this up for you and show it to you. This is the inside, the guts of a clipper. Right here, you have your magnet, and that magnet then has this metal arm here along the outside. And that metal arm is what's attached to the blade. So when this magnet turns on, this metal bar right inside here that wraps around it starts to bounce back and forth. One last thing I'm going to share with you guys on clippers. You may, and again, I'm going to ask this question, have you ever turned your clippers on and you hear this really loud grinding sound? It sounds like it's just trying to chew something up. It really doesn't sound great. And not that this is necessarily the safest option now that I've got this motor completely exposed, but we're going to play safely here. If I turn this on, right, nice and quiet, but you may one day hear this sound. If you've ever heard that sound, typically what you need to focus on is most of, especially these magnet-driven ones, have a tension screw right on the side here. And that tension screw, you can either tighten or loosen to adjust it. If you are hearing, again, one more time, ooh, that is not great. But if you hear that sound, that means it's too loose. You really have to be careful to get it just quiet enough, because if you over tighten it, you can cause those blades to actually lock up and they won't cut anything. So just like we can control the tension of our shears, consider controlling the tension of your clippers to get the best cut as well. Okay? So if you've got any questions on, again, shears, razor, or even clippers at this point in time, feel free to post them in the chat. But I want to share a few other things in consideration working with your clippers, especially if you're working with some type of a rotary or a motor-driven clipper. Many times you'll have the option to remove the blade and replace it with a different type of a blade attachment. Most magnetic-driven clippers you're probably familiar with the plastic comb attachments, right? So those, although can be used across just about any clipper, you'll typically find that your motor and rotary actually have swappable blades. Your magnetic typically has a plastic comb attachment. So again, get to know all those different resources, all the different length measurements. Again, you could even see here on the screen using something like this. This is a 5/0. You know, what exactly does that mean? Make sure that you're definitely spending the time to understand that measurement and how close that may cut to the scalp. So there's a variety of different blades. Like I said, there's also texturizing blades. So definitely, just as much as you would invest time learning about your shears, make sure you're investing just as much time learning about your clippers. The next thing that I want to share with you here is the comb. Now, combs, of course, are really important in the tools that we use, and there are a number of different options. I'm going to pull out a few here. For example, again, from my tool arsenal. Just a few of these to highlight here. But looking at a thing like a clipper comb, all right, this clipper comb here is a bit slimmer, also known as a flat top comb in this case because of how smooth and flat it may be. But you may also receive a clipper comb that looks something similar to this here, all right? Have a handle. This is a bit different than the shampoo comb, which I don't have necessarily on me, but a shampoo comb was great for detangling the hair, while one of these clipper combs, or even the option to go with something like a Master Sketcher. Oh, I've got that in here. I know you're here. There it is. A Master Sketcher is a wider clipper comb that offers both wide teeth and fine teeth. So again, use the right comb because although you might choose the right tool, like a shear, a texturer shear, a clipper, or a trimmer, if you don't partner it with the right comb, you could actually do a lot of damage to your haircuts. You know, using something like a taper comb or a barbering comb, which gives you a very narrow tip to, especially in the fine teeth. This is good for working in those tight nooks and crannies. And again, very popular amongst the men's grooming area because it allows you to get in those tight spaces like a mustache or in sideburns as well. You'll also find that many times you have options in the color of your comb. Are you using a dark comb or a light comb? In this case, I've got a black comb and a white comb. Choosing the right comb to go against the right canvas. If I'm working with dark hair, a lighter comb is really beneficial because it'll allow me to see what I'm working with and what I'm removing much more easily. While working on lighter colored hair like blondes, going with a dark comb can be very beneficial because, again, it offers contrast to the canvas that I'm working on. So don't only just think about the tool, but think about the color of it as well. How will that help you in easily seeing what you're working with? And again, you know, there's a variety of different options, a variety of different colors, a variety of different materials that you could even choose from when selecting the right comb. Probably one of the most common you will be working with is a standard cutting comb. If I pull that out of my case here, a standard cutting comb is what you know, typically about 7 inches in length, has both wide teeth and fine teeth. While this is good for shear work, the one thing I also want to point out is it may not be ideal for clipper work. And the reason being is with how narrow a standard cutting comb can be, if I place a clipper over it to do any clipper over comb, well, man, I can easily overlap those teeth. And now it becomes what I like to call free graphic day in your salon because now you've just put a line or a hole in the haircut. You got to turn it into something fancy or they're going to be pretty disappointed. So the right tool, you know, working with a clipper over comb technique, a thin comb won't be ideal. Going to a wider comb, okay, if I put this over here by the light, a lot better because it allows me to truly get protection and coverage with that clipper. There's no overlap happening. right? So the right comb needs to be combined with the right tool when cutting and working with that, and you'll achieve your best results when you factor all of those things into it. Again, be mindful. It's one tool isn't always going to cut it. You know, one shear, and you even down to your comb maintenance. If there's one other thing I'd like to leave with you, if the teeth are snapping out of your comb, it's time to get a new comb, right? Don't work with a comb that has no teeth, right? It's not gonna benefit you. It leaves gaps with it that allows more hair to come through, less tension to be controlled. Combs are not expensive. I encourage you, invest into them appropriately so that way you have the right comb with the right number of teeth to get the job done. Corey, where is it that you live right now? I forget.
Texas.
Texas. So I know where Corey's from. Naturally, there's less teeth to work with. So he wants to make sure that he's buying a comb. Probably not. No, I'm just kidding. I could have chosen any state to make fun of for that one there. But again, it's, you know, teeth are important, not only for you, but for your comb as well. Keep the teeth there, keep them healthy. So really think about this, other things, a few other essentials I want you to be mindful of. And of course, this is always related to where you may be performing your services. Factor in other things like a neck strip. Neck strips can be very beneficial during your service of hair cutting. The reason is not only for safety purposes, you know, to protect the cape from contact, but in many times that neck strip, especially if you're working with men's grooming, that neck strip can really help prevent a lot of those finer hairs from sticking to their neck throughout the service, right? Also make sure that you have a well-working water bottle. If you're going to be working with razor cutting, it is going to be important that that hair stays damp throughout the service. You do not want to be using that razor on dry hair, else you're going to experience a lot of drag and a lot of pull, which is not comfortable for your guest. If you don't have a water bottle that works, that service is not going to go as smoothly for you, okay? The other thing to even factor into is your cape during the service, right? While your guest is there receiving a service, make sure they're comfortable. We know that there are traditionally two different capes that are available in our industry, both a styling or cutting cape, as well as a chemical cape. You know, during hair cutting service, you traditionally don't need a very heavy duty cape to be there. But again, always follow your state regulations with that. A few other things I even like to talk about, which this sentence sounds a little funky, but hair sculpting products range in viscosity. I'll be honest, I actually really love using what is commonly known as a cutting lotion while doing a service. Many different products create cutting lotions or these even like leave-in spray treatments that keep the hair wet for longer, so you turn to your water bottle less frequently, but they also help create a really nice glide through the hair. So as you are combing, as you are working with it, you don't experience as much snag, pull, or resistance. So consider adding that to your tool belt if you don't currently use it. And again, most brands, whatever you use, have some type of either a leave-in treatment, a spray-in lotion, or even known as a cutting lotion can be very beneficial to you. The last thing I really want to leave with you all when thinking about hair cutting, and I say this because I see it so often, remember the furniture around you. I can't tell you the number of times I've walked through a salon and I've seen an artist look like they're trying to do the most awkward yoga poses I've ever seen, when in reality, all they need to do is use the hydraulic lever of their chair. Pump the chair up when you need to get lower. Lower the chair down when you need to work above them. Those simple things will actually help hair cutting go so much smoother for you. I can't tell you the number of times I see hairdressers on their very tiptoes, but the chair is also pumped up as high as it can go. It makes no sense, people. Or they're trying to work really low and their guest is super low to the ground. Please remember those hydraulic chairs. Even consider things for those of you that might be really tall and might even say to yourself, even when the chair is as high as it can go, I still can't get low enough. Consider things like a cutting stool and how that can really help you. The important thing when working with things like a cutting stool is that you really have to focus on your core and your pose there, that using a cutting stool does not allow you to start slumping and getting lazy in a chair. Your pose, your ergonomics is just as important in a cutting stool as it is when you're standing on your feet. So think about those different types of resources that are available to you. And also in men's hair cutting, one other thing I would leave you with, and I know Corey may even talk more about it in his taper session, but the mirror can be your best friend. Use that mirror often, almost like a second set of eyes, to look at the shape you're creating so you know if you're creating balance or asymmetry when you want to. Especially if you're working with clippers and doing things like a taper or a fade, looking at your cut through a mirror can sometimes help you spot things that you can't see when looking at it straight on. So when we talk about furniture, really think about everything that's in your area that can really benefit you. So with that, those are some of the tools and some of the factors that I would really like you to consider and think about, again, when working with, hair cutting. And this is a topic I definitely will go into, further detail with in future sessions. But it's important to just lay the groundwork that you guys as artists have a variety of tools at your fingertips. Spend time researching them, spend time getting familiar with them, and spend time really using them so you understand what they offer you, okay? With that, to kind of close out this session a bit, I want to do a little recap with you all. So what I'd love to do at this point in time is go ahead and switch over to Socrative. So for those of you that might have logged into Socrative.com, or you even have the Socrative app open, we're going to take a few moments to do a few review questions on that Socrative tool. So I'm going to go ahead and just switch this over to you all so you guys can see what activities we'll be playing here. I appreciate this. Thank you, everyone, for letting me know that you guys have enjoyed the class so far. I'm going to go ahead and, again, switch over. You can participate with me during this review game. What we're going to do is on Socrative, we're going to go ahead and log in on the student side of things. So if you go to Socrative.com, go to the student login. If you are using the Socrative student app, again, what you'll need to enter at this point in time is the room name is going to be Pivot Point. And if you'll go ahead and join that class, we're going to go ahead and start up our review activity, which is going to be just a series of multiple choice or true-false questions. If you don't have Socrative at your fingertips, ladies and gentlemen, you can also use the chat for this. So you can participate either way. Now that you've seen a bit of Socrative, I'm going to go ahead and, again, I'm going to launch these multiple choice questions that you'll be able to participate in. So again, Socrative.com, room name is Pivot Point. Again, you can play there with me, or you can play right here in the chat. So let's talk about this. Let's do a little review here. I'm going to just present to you 5 questions I want you to think about. Question number 1, which again, I'm going to be launching here on Socrative as a true-false. If I can actually get this in the right position on my end, I'm sorry. New share. Looks like it switched over. There we go. And kick it over. Boom. I think we should be good to go. So true-false. On Socrative, shears are used to create a clean, soft edge. Would you consider this to be true or false? Again, you can also list true or false in the chat, and let's see what you guys think. And on Socrative, I'm watching those of you that have submitted. It looks like 73% of you are leaning towards false. Let's find out if you are correct. You are. What makes this statement a false statement? Shears actually create a blunt edge, not a soft edge. The tool that would create a soft edge would be a razor. So let's go ahead and move over to question number 2, true or false. As a rule, short shears are used for precision or detailed cuts. So let me go ahead and relaunch a new true-false question for those of you in Socrative. Again, you could also use the chat. Let me know, do you think that this is true or false? Short shears, thinking like that 5-inch, 5 1/4. Are these great for precision detailed sculpting? And looking at Socrative, after the answers we've received there so far, it looks like 92% of you are saying true. And with that, you are correct. The reason why short shears are really great, again, remember, the shorter the blade, the more kind of nooks and crannies you can get into, which are great for that precision detailed work around the ear, on a perimeter, those tight nooks and crannies. So good job. Let's go to this next question, which is going to be a short answer. The movable blade of a shear. So if I go ahead and grab my shears, the movable blade of the shear is controlled by what? All right, short answer. Is this your ring finger? All right, ring or thumb? How would you answer this? Ring or thumb? Which controls the movable blade? I'm even giving you a little view right here on camera. And it looks like everybody here is submitting thumb in chat and on Socrative. So awesome job, everybody. Glad to see you guys have picked that one up. Let's also talk about this next question here. Taper shears consist, and I haven't been clicking through my answers. Let me go ahead and catch up. Thumb. Taper shears consist of one straight blade and one blade that is what? How would you describe that secondary blade? Go ahead and put your answers in Socrative, or put your answers into the chat. And there's a couple different ways you could describe this, so I'm really open to seeing. You might see one on screen, but again, very open to what we will actually see here as far as descriptions go. And already, again, seeing a few ways to describe it. Awesome job on picking some of this stuff up. So the answers I'm seeing, the most popular answer is being described as notched. We're also seeing serrated or toothed with teeth. I even saw someone describe the 8, 16, and 32. So all of those are great answers. Notched is, of course, one way, but if you think about with teeth, toothed, taper 8, 32, 16, again, serrated, like each of those certainly can offer some different ways to describe it. Let's move on to the very last question of review, and then I'm going to give you guys a bonus tip at the end of the lesson here. Taper shears, also known as thinning shears, are used on the ends of the hair to reduce what? What do taper shears help reduce? Okay. Again, a few different ways you could probably describe this, so let's hear what you would use. And these answers are looking great. It looks like the majority of the way in which you guys would describe this would be bulk, which is an awesome answer. But I'm also saying the word weight, also a great way to describe it. One person even submitted the ability to soften a line, right? And that absolutely is true. So all of those answers are really great ways to describe what those taper or texturizing shears can do. So I'm going to go ahead and just stop this share. Let me just go ahead. Last tip I want to give you guys for a little bit of practice when working with your straight shears. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to grab my workhorse, my 6-inch shear. This is an exercise I love to encourage every new hair cutter to practice. Many of you, when you pick up a shear, may find yourself doing what's known as quacking, where when you open it, you kind of both your blades open and close, and you're like, I just can't get a true stationary or a still blade. Here's a great way to practice it. When you're binge watching any of your favorite shows, put your opposite cutting hand. All right, so I'm right-handed, so I'm going to put my left hand in front of me, and I'm going to take my cutting hand, and I'm going to place the tips of my shears right on my hand like so. What this allows me to do is to practice opening and closing just the movable blade, while the stationary blade stays rested on the back of my hand. If you sit there and just watch your favorite shows while practicing this, what it will do is start to develop those muscles that live in the back of your hand, your wrist, and your forearm that give you the control. Kind of like Richard Simmons would say, you might feel the burn, okay? So with this, all right, we are going to go through this exercise. What you may find you do at the beginning is you might find that your shears want to rock up and down like this. And that's exactly what habit you need to break. Hold it still, practice up and down. That way, as you practice this, you'll be able to remove that second hand and truly practice keeping more of a still and mobile blade control. And that's the motion you want to develop as a hairdresser. So again, binge watch your favorite show, practice with your two hands to help you control. Open those shears as wide as you can, all right? Get that practice in there. And that's a tip that will really help you out for things like shear over comb, any of your tapering techniques, even general shear practice. It really helps you out with that shear control. So that's a little bonus tip I've got for you guys. Practice that one out. But hopefully you guys have really enjoyed this session on sculpture tools and some of the essentials and tips that go along with it from me to you. I look forward to seeing you guys on another Fundamentals Live session in the future. But if you have any questions, feel free to post them now and I'd be happy to answer them. If not, again, thanks for joining and I'll see you next time.